Well, hello. I hope there will be no more audio issues, but I'm going to be trying a few things like sharing a video, a stream that I heard yesterday, so even if there are no technical issues now, there may be some later, so bear with me. Today, so far, I have I've noticed two tweets worth commenting on. One is Nick Griffin's tweet of his half-hour interview with some American called Jay Burton, and the other was E. Michael Jones on Rumble last night. And the other was Caleb Morpin. I may not even mention all of them before I finish the stream, and the other, and another one is Paul van der Clay's estuary protocol, estuary meeting yesterday. So what am I on about today? Same old, same old. Obviously, nothing is going to get done if you won't discuss the elephant in the room. Why won't you discuss the elephant in the room? Because I guess when you have to surrender, when you are utterly defeated and somebody has to wave the white flag, nobody is exactly falling over themselves to volunteer the task of waving the white flag to the enemy. And that's why no one will discuss the elephant in the room. For some years now, I have said that religion is the solution. I, as an agnostic and a moral and political philosopher, have been saying that religion, even if you don't believe in God and the afterlife, has a definite social, political and moral utility. And that's, I think, quite easy to remember and easy to understand. More recently, I've been more specific in saying that it is necessary to believe that God will reward good and punish evil in this life and the next in order to incentivize correct behavior. And I don't think that's rocket science. And I've also been saying that Westerners who think their religion is Christianity when it suits them do not really believe that Jesus is God. And they don't believe in Jesus, that Jesus is God, because, well, it's an absurd belief, isn't it? But why did they pretend to believe in it? And I'm saying it was only because their absolute monarchs threatened to burn them at the stake if they denied the divinity of Jesus. That's why Christians have the ancient practice of burning people, heretics, at the stake. And once they stopped doing that, the American Revolution broke out. But do Americans understand their own history? No, they don't, because they keep calling themselves a Christian nation. And to be fair to them, they have been induced into believing in this because, well, what other religion are they supposed to identify with? And that is because they do not understand their own history, and because of their Islamophobia, they refuse to read the Quran, even though it is well documented that Thomas Jefferson owned a copy of the Quran. He ordered it from a New England bookshop when he was a law student in 1765, when he was 21 years of age. And therefore the White House Quran belonged to him and is still occasionally used when there is some Muslim member of the House of Representatives being sworn in. So nobody is really going to deny that, except that they don't want to talk about it, right? They do not want to talk about the fact that the American Republic was founded by men who in Europe would be considered heretical Christians. They pretend not to understand that. And if you tell them, if you explain it to them, they will instantly forget, because they want to think of themselves as a Christian nation. And of course, they will refuse to look up all the references I point them to, because they don't want to know, and who can force them if they want to instantly forget what I'm saying. After all, it is shameful not to know your own history, not to know where you come from. But what is the religion of America? It is anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, of course. They have no official religion, so the beliefs and values of Americans would be formed by their corrupt and incompetent elites in Congress who make the laws. And while I have noticed a certain amount of concern amongst the white middle-class Americans, they are still not getting on with asking themselves the questions that they need to ask themselves. I have to step away for a moment, but I will continue. I suppose I should check if I am being heard. It appears not. Am I being heard? Can you hear me? Oh yes, well, it seems you can hear me, which is a relief. So, not talking about Refusing to discuss the nature and purpose of religion, refusing to look up references is, of course, a sign of denial and a deliberate action to ignore truth. If you instantly forget something that is said, you must be suffering from memory problems, or just because of the culture you live in, you will wish to forget it because it challenges the very system you live under. And then to refuse to discuss it when challenged to discuss it is, obviously a further sign of denial. Denial of what? Denial of truth, denial of logic, denial of the most important survival strategies. I suppose you could excuse them by saying they need leadership to discuss these things. They, as ordinary Americans, fear to discuss these weighty subjects. We're not given any indication or encouragement by their political classes, who obviously want to continue ignoring the problem because they wish to continue with the political system that is democracy, which has caused all these problems of division and the inability of the government to look beyond the next election. This is all a problem which they refuse to acknowledge, because to acknowledge the problem of representative democracy is to acknowledge that it has failed. And they cannot bear to acknowledge its failure because it extends for at least 200 years. And then there are further problems of their religion, which spans 2,000 years. 2,000 years of failure, absurdity, and lies. And so collectively they prefer to jump off the cliff than do a U-turn, or at least stop heading towards the edge of the cliff. Well, I can understand that neurosis would prevent people from acting rationally, asking proper questions. You would have thought that middle-class Americans who have children to consider would be more prepared to talk about these things, but not a bit of it, because in a way they are being distracted by the demands of being a YouTuber, which is about sending out teasers, making streams inordinately long that don't really discuss anything, that is just about a vibe that your particular personality is capable of sustaining. So it doesn't even matter that you don't discuss these things. You just say a few words like Nick Fuentes or Christian nationalism, and people will come, and the more moronic of them will think it's enough. It's enough to satisfy their need to hear about these words being said by their perceived leaders, even though nothing intelligible is being said about it. And when you try to prompt them into actually discussing it, it's No, they would rather talk about root beer or boring stuff, banal stuff that are apolitical, because it's not their problem. If you're a boomer, it's not your problem. Even though you do have children and grandchildren, it's somehow not your problem. And there are these people who call themselves Christians, who are therefore supposed to believe in the afterlife, but who will be quite unable to entertain the idea that Christianity is idolatry, or that there will be consequences for them if Jesus is not God. But all they can do is concentrate on their this life concerns. And that is why they cannot discuss anything at all and reach any conclusion, because I think the intention is really not to discuss anything. Now let me see if I can in some way make sure that what I propose to share is audible. Oh, I've got somebody here. Objective, do you want to join me? I can stop this attempt to share this video, because I have a feeling it's going to be a disaster. But I'll put the link in the stream in case you want to join. But if not, I will attempt to gosh, I don't even know if you can see it. Can you see it? No, because for some reason I'm stuck in this other identity that I can't seem to move back from. But what I could do is I could email it to you, couldn't I? Let's see how I can do it. Oh, I don't think I can. Okay, I'll just forget it. It's too complicated. This is an old computer, and opening too many windows will crash it. But at least now I have an audience of one. Great. So now I can just talk to you, which is easier, and I won't try to share videos and whatnot. And having spoken to you, Objective Ethics, I will at least have an idea of how you think. I know you want to solve problems through philosophy and objective morality, and since we are both agnostic, we can we at least start from the same standpoint. And I'm saying it doesn't even matter if people don't actually believe in the afterlife, as long as the official government position is that there are certain laws, and that all in that society are supposed to obey, and those laws are based on a certain view of life and the afterlife. So People are motivated by acquiring status, and status can be easily lowered and raised by the people around us. So if people around us say we said the wrong word, express a wrong view, then our status will be lowered, and there will be people around us who are very happy to lower our status when they see that we have, misspoken. Certainly, if we have children, we will find our children very well equipped with all kinds of names that they can call us, that they learnt at school or at university, to deny the respectability of their parents' political or religious views. And the whole point of religion is to impose a hierarchy. And I see that objective ethics is saying how difficult it is for him to, just say, this is what I want, I'm the boss, and you do this and you do that, and don't you argue or you'll be in trouble. And at some stage, this is necessary because we already know that this is how the military is supposed to be run. And if we're going to have a military and say it is for the defence of our territory, then it is very important that it is working properly. And I think it is, perfectly obvious that you cannot have a military run on egalitarian principles. Somebody has to be the leader, somebody has to give the orders, and somebody has to take the orders, because we do not want to be in a situation where there are more chiefs than there are Indians. This is an American expression. That means that you do not want to be in a position where there are more people prepared to give orders than to obey them. And this is what the problem is in our matriarchy that is run on egalitarian principles. What is a matriarchy? It is a society prioritising the preferences of non-parent and unmarried parents who casually conceived and parented their illegitimate offspring. And we already know that the illegitimacy rate in America is 40%. And this is obviously electorally significant. And that's why your politicians lie to you. They dare not tell you how things are because they know you're going to get upset, and then because of the fact that you have another political party in competition with you, they don't want you going to their rival who will say, there, did this nasty president say things to hurt your feelings and upset you? Come to us for comforting lies. And I'm saying, read Washington's political farewell speech, which warns Americans against political parties. And even if they have read it, they don't take it seriously. Surely, as an American, you ought to be taking whatever the Founding Fathers said seriously, or take an interest in the founding of America, but not a bit of it. It's always, we've done it now. We've been having political parties since the 1800s. Yes, the 1800s. And we're not going to stop now, because we love our elections. Don't we? We love the way corporate America runs your elections, funds the campaigns of all these political parties who end up serving the interests of corporate America. That is what has happened. It's pretty easy to understand. But I guess all these Americans want to carry on voting. And when I say Washington warned them against it all those years ago, they don't care. They're not going to be the ones to say a one-party state is a Washingtonian idea. It is not Nazi, it's not fascist, it's not commie. It's from a founding father, George Washington, the founding father, in fact. because without his military leadership, the Americans would not have won the American Revolution, rejecting monarchy. And that is the key idea which nobody understands, not even E. Michael Jones. He does not seem to understand that Christianity is about defending the divine rights, the divine right of kings to rule as absolute monarchs. It's all about absolute monarchy. And the Whig interpretation of history. I guess nobody knows, nobody cares what's a wig. Is it something you wear on your head? Mind you, it was only recently that I discovered that Catholics and Protestants have taken a markedly different view of the Whig interpretation of history. The Whig interpretation of history is the idea that, well, it's a sacred narrative of liberals, because since the Protestant Revolution, the West has enjoyed more and more liberty, and this means that liberalism is a good thing. And the Protestant Reformation was really the European monarchs liberating themselves from the totalitarian control of the Pope, telling them what to do, who they can marry, because of course during the English Reformation it was really about Henry VIII wanting to bequeath his kingdom not to his daughter but to a son, and he had to go through 3 wives in order to sire a son. But obviously it was important to him. He didn't want to bequeath his kingdom to a daughter whose authority will be continually challenged, as we saw from the reign of Bloody Mary, who was married to King Philip of Spain, putting the English in fear of being run by the Catholics again. And then when she died, Elizabeth, the Anglican, took over, but then Elizabeth realised that if she married, she would have trouble on her hands, because the religion and the motives of the husband would be endlessly discussed, and so she decided to be a virgin queen. And I guess she did all right. She had a long reign and died a natural death. But the point is, monarchy was decisively rejected by the founding fathers, and a very good thing too, because the whole principle of being an absolute monarch is that your subjects had to follow your religion or else be burnt as heretics at the stake, which is a very unpleasant death. And we know what happened when the English gave up this practice, because let's look at the history of heretic burning. So the last man to be burnt at the stake was in 1612. His name was Edward Whiteman. He was an Anabaptist. So he was the last man to be burnt at the stake in Britain. And in 1697, Thomas Whiteman, a 20-year-old medical student in Edinburgh, was hanged for denying the Trinity. And before 80 years was up, the American Revolution broke out. So either you have absolute monarchy, fiercely enforcing the religion of the monarch on his subjects, or a republican revolution will break out. And of course it wasn't the first republican revolution, because the French Revolution followed the American Revolution, and it was actually caused by it because the King of France, Louis XVI, found he was in debt through sponsoring the Revolutionary Wars of the Americans because of inter-European rivalry, doubtless caused by the fact that England was Protestant and France was Catholic. But anyway, his coffers were empty. The church, the First Estate, being the Catholic Church, refused to pay, refused to help refill the coffers of King Louis, because, well, they must have said that, well, we didn't ask you to start a revolutionary war with the British, why should we pay for it? And the Second Estate, being the barons, who were the warrior caste of France, said, we didn't ask you to do it, so we won't pay for it out of our own money. And of course the burden fell on the Third Estate, being the commoners, and the rest is history. And we know from the French Revolution that the French revolutionaries rejected Catholicism. They sold the properties of the church, a looting expedition, as E. Michael Jones would say. They changed their calendar, they changed their measurements. We get the metric system from the French revolutionaries. And they even started a cult of reason, and they found it to be somehow insufficient to address their spiritual needs, and then they started a cult of the Supreme Being, and eventually they found themselves back in the system, back supporting monarchy, emperors, and Christianity. The Russian revolutionaries were somewhat fiercer, entirely exterminating the Russian royal family. But we also have to bear in mind that all these European royals were related to each other. So Kaiser William was the grandson of Queen Victoria, and so was Nicholas II. There are photographs of George V and Nicholas II dressed in a blazer with their moustaches and beards, looking as if they could be twins. But when Nicholas sought asylum in Britain, when the revolution broke out in Russia, he was told to sling his hook. Asylum was declined, and the entire Russian royal family were exterminated by the Red Guards in 1918. So we should understand that blood is not thicker than water, even amongst the blue-blooded European royal families. So you would have thought that some historian might have noticed that Christendom ended in 1918. But possibly because of the power of the English language and the control that the Anglo-Saxons have over their media, none of this was expressed, or if it was, in a few unheard of books from a few unheard of historians, this was never properly understood by the world at large. And this means that the lesson was unlearned, and therefore Christianity was allowed to continue on its very long and established history of failure. We know that Christianity, such as it is in America, is only cultural Christianity, where the artifacts of Christianity are not worn as an armour but as accessories that a woman might have to wear to go with her gown, her ball gown, her party dress, rings, earrings, bracelets, necklaces, bangles. They are worn as accessories with no desire to use it properly as an armour. And so I would say that the project of Christianity has failed. Even though currently Israel is being governed by the principles of Christian Zionism, I should say. So the agenda of Christian Zionism is to get all the Jews living in Israel and then convert them to Christianity to hurry the arrival of the Messiah. That is really the unstated agenda of Christian Zionism. We know Jewish Zionism is dead in the water because Jews, being only 1% of the total global population, are indeed helpless to have their kind of Zionism, because they can only even get to live in the Holy Land with the cooperation and support of a powerful Gentile empire, either Christian or Islamic. So to talk about Jewish Zionism is ignorant and moronic. It is not Jewish Zionism that operates in Israel, but Christian Zionism and liberal Zionism, because, and it has been said many a time by politicians, that Israel is good by definition because it is the only liberal democracy in the Middle East, which is presumably why it is resented and hated by the Ummah. But because I never really get a chance to explain this to anybody who matters, because they just prefer to blame Jews and moan about Muslims, which is their unofficial, unacknowledged religion. So while there may be people calling themselves Christian nationalists, they don't really believe that Jesus is God, or even in God or the afterlife. They only use Christian nationalism as a way to raise their status from their former low status of being white nationalists. You don't hear much from these white nationalists anymore, do you? Nobody admits to being a white nationalist because they know they would be condemned for being racist and anti-Semitic and low income and low education and no status. So they don't talk of themselves as white nationalists, but now upgrade themselves by calling themselves Christian nationalists. But that is a project dead in the water unless they really think they have a realistic chance of becoming a Christian republic after passing a Christian amendment, which has been done in American Samoa. But if you pass a Christian amendment, it means that you lose the First Amendment, and there would be the ironic prospect of Muslims fresh off the boat defending the First Amendment with non-Christian Americans who prefer to keep their First Amendment as heritage Americans. So there are all these scenarios to contemplate, but nobody will really engage on the subject. They will, I'm sure, they will continue to pretend not to understand and pretend that Christian nationalism is about to succeed. Even though quite a few of these people have children, legitimate children even, because they are middle class, church-going Americans who, I guess, don't want to engage on these subjects because I guess they don't want to be the one holding out the white flag. Thank you, Objective Ethics, for attempting. So, well, I mean, I think I did deal with your point about, how people won't take orders because, they prefer to be sort of nudged by, lies and carrot. And the thing is, you need both. You need both to keep order. You need incentives, which is the carrot, and of course you need deterrence, which is the stick. You need both. And if men are sent in to battle with only the carrot, of course they're going to get smashed and defeated. And that's why you need the rule of law. You need the law to say, hey, you can't do this, and if you do, you're going to be punished. Objective Ethics says, yes, the American universities have been taken over by liberal, politically correct, motivated teachers. I am an independent centrist. I think the far left is just as crazy as the far right. Yes, but I think you should notice that the government always hogs the centre ground and calls anyone that doesn't agree with it far right or far left, extremists, domestic terrorists, and the like. And the only way we can argue with them is to say, no, you can't hog the centre ground as you always do. We want to look at the rules that you support. Of course the government will always hog the centre ground and push everyone out and defame them by calling them radicals, extremists, and the like. And that is why we need a constitution that says what the rules are. But it is tragic that Americans, who you would have thought would be the people most equipped to protect their rights, have not been able to protect their rights at all. Objective Ethics continues, I looked into WIG after watching one of your videos. I haven't spent enough time on it to speak intelligently about it, but at a quick glance it was quite interesting. You just have to, Google WIG interpretation of history, and it's basically saying that liberals see it as a sacred narrative and say, well, ever since the Protestant Reformation, we have been, getting richer and more free. And ain't that a good thing? And ain't Protestants, better Christians than Catholics who conducted the Inquisition and, and burned heretics at the stake and supported absolute monarchy. And exasperatingly, Michael Jones doesn't seem to understand that, because I think he's too concentrated on using Anglophobia to win his argument against Jews. And I suppose what I find so frustrating is people who don't understand their own history. So I can't understand why E. Michael Jones keeps saying that Americans would find salvation by becoming Catholic. I mean, how would that help Americans? Because, let's say they become Catholic, but Catholicism have no codified principles. And if you look at the failure of Catholicism in South America, for heaven's sakes, in South America, did these wonderful Catholics, become, republic? Okay, yes, South America is mostly full of republics, full of Catholics, right? Yes, I know that. But they've had terrible wars with each other. If you've heard of the Paraguayan War, where they basically, the participants of the Triple Alliance depopulated themselves by fighting these wars against each other. And I know people will say, oh, it's not because they were Catholic, but how can you even deny your own religion? Because if you did ask these people who participated in the war of the Triple Alliance, what religion are they going to say they are? They're going to say they're Catholic, right? So it's Catholics fighting against each other. Not that Protestants haven't done similar things. And that is why Christianity cannot be your religion, because of all the harm it has already done to Westerners that for some reason they haven't noticed. And they haven't noticed because the government haven't informed them. They didn't learn it from their history textbooks when they went to school. I guess they're not going to take it from me, but I don't see how they can deny it. I'm not making up these historical tragedies. I didn't make up the story of the Holy Roman Empire and its extinction, or the European wars of religion. But what I'm saying is that Western man will be utterly helpless, because he is helpless to organise himself. Because there is no big idea. Because if we're all atheists and we all want to keep our status in this life, we're not going to grant status to somebody else, even though we know they are better than we are. And that's why you get this kind of intransigence at work and everywhere else. Certainly in the field of political activism, nobody is going to say, you're right and I'm wrong, because that would imply a loss of status. But if there is no leader, then there is no route to an agreed destination. And what is the agreed destination? Well, I think it ought to be better government. And what would better government mean? It must be government in the national interest. And what could nationalists do to rehabilitate the reputation of nationalism? It must be to define nationalism as government in the national interest. And once you've done that, you can build on this platform the idea that it would be in the national interest to follow a moral system that supports patriarchy, and by that it is meant a moral system that supports treating unmarried parents as sex offenders, because you want to encourage people to marry before they have children, to give their children the responsible and committed parenting that they need to become the next generation of productive citizens. Because if you have damaged children, sexually abused children, or physically abused children, or mentally ill children, or underachieving children who learned nothing at school, then you won't be producing a viable workforce, and this means that your government will continue importing immigrants to do the labour that still needs to be done. So it's fundamentally a labour problem, which nobody seems to want to acknowledge, and this labour problem is caused by bad gender relations. Bad labour relations is caused by, obviously, attempts to replace local labour with cheaper immigrant labour, and the labour shortage is caused by not enough men and women of childbearing age marrying to properly parent the next generation of workers. So I'm afraid, unless you solve this problem, things are just going to go from bad to worse. And for some reason, nobody wants to talk about it, because I suppose I've made my solution so clear. I'm saying, well, you need a religion. What's the closest religion you can have that, well, what is the most Christianity adjacent religion? Of course it's Islam. It can't be Hinduism and Buddhism. And if you look at Hinduism and Buddhism, their track record is not very good, is it? And you're not going to become Jews, so you're just stuck with Sharia, which is actually more American than any other religion, because, as I keep saying, the First Amendment is supported by Chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran, and it says, there is no compulsion in belief. Truth stands clear from error. Your next question will be, well, how come Muslims do not seem to be aware of this verse? And I'm saying, well, most of them live under absolute monarchs, and absolute monarchy is not compatible with Islam, because the Sunnis will tell you that the 4 rightly guided caliphs were not kings. We know that they are not kings because they weren't related to each other, and they didn't bequeath their kingdom to each other. And the caliph, these 4 rightly guided caliphs were only chosen after consultation. What happened to the 5th caliph? Well, he was an absolute monarch. And as you know, absolute monarchs will easily be able to imprison Islamic scholars who have an interpretation of the Quran that they dislike. So that's a problem. But then the solution would be to delegitimize all Islamic scholars who live in a kingdom. And then we can go to the Republic of Iran. I accept that there are plenty of republics, or not plenty, but I know of a few that are really monarchies in disguise, such as the one in North Korea, possibly the one in Afghanistan, if the current emir in Afghanistan becomes deceased. We need to know who the next emir is, and if the next emir is the son of the current emir, then it is, I guess, a monarchy in disguise. And we also know that in Iran, their Imam Khomeini has a son who may possibly inherit from him when, he was born in 1945. So we will see. But the point is that you would have thought that all rational and informed people would not wish to live under absolute monarchy. And this means that constitutional monarchy should also be abolished. After all, what is the point of being the British monarch if you cannot even enjoy your First Amendment rights? I know people will say that Britain is not America, But there is this phrase in the American Declaration of Independence about certain rights being unalienable. And this means it must be of universal application. And therefore, King Charles ought to enjoy his freedom of belief and freedom of expression, and there should be proposals coming not only from me but from others asking King Charles if he really does worship the Trinity, and if he doesn't, whether he is Christian, and if he isn't Christian, then what religion is he? He may not. Well, we know from what he said about Islam that he is considered likely to convert to Islam, but we don't know. But if he does reject Anglicanism, then he might be made to abdicate, and I think that would be a good thing, because it would clear up a lot of misunderstandings about who we really are. I don't think Europeans understand that they are basically second-rate white people. They are third-rate white people, and they would be people who still live in British territories in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, formerly called British Dominions, with governor-generals, with the right to dismiss elected prime ministers, answering to the British monarch, who answers to Washington. So it's all linked. Yes, thank you, Yon God, for coming. You should certainly check out Objective Ethics and his YouTube channel. He discusses philosophy, and in a much concentrated way, and an easy to follow way to follow manner, compared to the blather and chit chat that goes on in the estuary protocols, which is really meant as teasers, and I guess designed not really to get to any conclusion, but to get a bigger and bigger group of people interested in it, and to play the lottery of getting your pet subject discussed. But even if your pet subject were discussed, it will be just a very, very, very superficial discussion, and it's these superficial discussions that drive me crazy. I continue to think that the American people are the only people in a position to do something about their government, but from the way they are talking, I don't think so. But I mean, they are the closest group that approximates, the educated middle class, who I presume want to do something about their government, even if they are currently too neurotic to discuss anything that really matters. Chief of which is the nature and purpose of religion, which thankfully Objective Ethics does discuss, because philosophy is really about what it is wise to believe. Is it wise to believe in God, even though he may not exist? Is it wise to pretend to believe in God, or encourage people to pretend to believe in God and the afterlife? I would say yes. We can still be agnostic and say religion has a very definite social, moral and political utility in keeping your group in existence. Because really, when you think about it, it is these religious groups that are the most powerful and enduring human groups on earth, who outlive empires and nations, and give us this exercise of moral reasoning. So if you're going to choose a religion for your group, you're going to choose the best one, aren't you? Wouldn't self-interest tell you to choose the best possible religion for your group? Objective Ethics says, America's a real shit show. Dogs chasing their tails make more progress than American citizens do. Well, I think Objective Ethics should take an interest in TLC. That's Paul van der Clay's This Little Corner. TLC is short for This Little Corner of the Internet, and it sounds twee as it is meant to, and is full of concerned Christians of Middle America wanting to talk about so many things, but being so afraid of talking about Nick Fuentes or Christian nationalism. And so I'm saying, yes, please talk about Nick Fuentes and Christian nationalism, and be aware that Christian imperialism has failed, and this is why there are all these problems. And Christianity remains a religion with no codified principles, and this means, and it was probably deliberate, Christianity has no codified principles because it wants to leave the space clear for the absolute monarch to make up the rules as he goes along. So you can't say, according to these codified principles of Christianity, you're not allowed to practice usury, for example. But even these Muslims with their Sharia and their Quran, in practice, under an absolute monarch, I guess you can't really say much if the consequence of promoting an interpretation of the Quran that your absolute monarch disagrees with is, possibly exile or imprisonment or loss of property or death. So I am promoting Islam. Well, there are lots of Islam is a belief system. What I claim to be the creator of is secular Quranism, which is a legal system. I am agnostic, but I'm saying you have to follow these rules to keep your society in order. And because it has principles on the regulation of gender relations, labour relations and international relations, it is my considered opinion that following these Quranic principles will create a more stable international order with fewer wars, a more stable economy, and more stable marriages, and more stable families, and mentally stable children and adults. And who would want to quarrel with this or reject these benefits unless you are an Islamophobe? And I'm saying you don't have to practice Islam in the way that you in a way that you disapprove of. Obviously, you'll be thinking of Pakistanis and Indians and, these people that you want to call people from shithole countries. But I'm saying you can practice it in a sensible way and consult people who are educated and professional and honourable to discuss these things. And my frustration is basically with all these people on YouTube who call themselves political activists, who deliberately avoid engagement, not just with me, but even with each other. And, because they're not good at debate, they don't want to do it, they just want to monologue and pander to their moronic viewers and subscribers who just want the same thing over and over and over again, because anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia and racism is their religion. And they're not going to change if there is no leadership from above to change their tune. And I see that there is not only are my accounts suppressed, there's also the problem of these people who claim to care about their race and their nation not wanting to discuss any of the points I raise. Because I guess they know they're going to lose the argument. I am actually the most knowledgeable theologian, I would say, on earth. I mean, if you don't agree, by all means challenge me on anything that I'm saying. I do not delete comments, I do not block people. I'm happy to engage with anyone. But sadly, that is not the modus operandi of others claiming to be political activists. And I'm saying, since America is a global hegemon, we should all be concentrating on the American people and saying, look, it's coming from your country. You are the only ones without an official religion, and this means your corrupt and incompetent ruling classes will keep making up the rules as they go along, with all these, ridiculous amendments that are basically... I didn't think the Founding Fathers would agree with a lot of the subsequent amendments after the that are not already in the 10th Amendment. One of the ones that I can think of is making gay marriage legal, because obviously that would have a depressing effect on birth rates and the production of a viable labour force. There is this ridiculous prohibition against presidents that have already served 2 terms not being able to take a 3rd term. I think you would be fortunate indeed to find a president you like so much that you want to elect them for a 3rd term. It is actually possible, and after the 3rd term they're going to want to retire. So there is no real reason against a president taking a 3rd term, except that maybe the deep state does not want any president to have so much authority through his longevity to be able to overturn the priorities and preferences of the deep state, which is linked to the military establishment. Once you have a standing army, they will have plans of their own, because they know that they are capable of forcing people to do all kinds of things. And also, once you have a standing army, you will be wanting to make the cost of funding a standing army worth their while, and you will be prone to wanting to wage imperial wars to secure your legacy, and then, when you do finally acquire your global empire, you'll have to keep it going at great cost, and not just in terms of blood and treasure, but also to your own reputation. And now we know that America has a president who says that he only follows his own morality, and there is no one in the media who even thought of interviewing Trump on what he thinks is morality and whether he has any moral principles. It would seem the logical next question to ask, but I'm just appalled that nobody even thinks to ask, what is morality? What are your moral principles? Mr. President, what is your religion? Is it really Christianity? Do you really worship the Trinity? How about are you a Christian national? All these questions completely unasked. All right, well, I guess I've gone on for long enough, and thank you all for listening. I will now end the stream, and thank you for listening and commenting and engaging with what I'm saying. It makes such a difference. Thank you again.